So hello everyone, this is the April webinar for TESOL Macedonia-Thrace Northern Greece. We are getting to the end of the school year. We are getting closer to the exams. So we thought it would be a great idea to have this last webinar prior to the exams devoted on what concerns us a lot, speaking tests, because they are frankly the factor we can never gauge. It can always be a pleasant surprise. It is a pleasant surprise, but it can also turn out not as successful as we imagined it. Before I start, I would like to make a couple of announcements. As most of you may remember, in May, we do not have a session. There is a reason for that. There are no Saturdays or Sundays without exams. So no matter when we organize it, it will be a bit of a no-no for most colleagues. So May is off. But in June, we will have the session that was intended for today. It didn't happen today because Fiona Mochlen, who is our speaker, celebrates Easter today, and she didn't realize when we had our first discussion. So this is going to take place on the 7th of June. And then in July, we are going to have a mini teacher training series of webinars totally free of charge for all our members, transitional and ex-paid up members. So what will that consist of? It will be 3 Tuesdays in July, the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st, and the certificate of attendance will be sent to those attending all 3 events. For the mini teacher training workshop, series of workshops, there won't be a recording, so that those of you who decide to come actually make the commitment. The course will run even if it's like, even if 3 people show up. We will have Google form, as I mentioned in the email that I sent, but it's too early to send it. I'm afraid that if I send it now, it will sort of be forgotten by that time. So I'll send it later on. For the time being, let's focus on this event for today and then June with Fiona Mochlen. We've started planning the following year. As you know, we will have a presentation at Associates Day at IATEFL, and I will have the opportunity to see plenty of people who I want to woo as future speakers. Once again, as you always hear me saying, the more TESOLers, the more windows, the more questions, the more chances we have of getting the big names. So thank you very much for showing up today. I realize it's a festive day. It's the beginning of Lent, the beginning of the last week of the Holy Week. Let me share my entire screen because otherwise my slides don't go. And then I will explain how I got inspired about this specific workshop. So I hope you can see my screen now. It's not in presentation, but it's loading. Can you see it? Can somebody wave at me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can.
I hope you can see them turning. If not, let me know. So some years ago, when I was still young and fresh and a budding teacher of exam classes, I was escorting a group of students. I think we were outside the old Capitol Hotel, which is now Holiday Inn. And there was a mother that was getting on my nerves because she kept badgering her son. She kept touching him. She kept fixing his collar, his hair. She was fussing all over him. And it was, I mean, the poor boy had his concerns and worries about an upcoming exam. And here was his mom trumpeting it to the entire world. I'm an exam mom. I'm here to support my son. My son is taking exams. Not only did she do that to her son, she also semi-bullied me. in a polite way, no rudeness, but she was like, talk to him, you, tell him what to say. Come, don't waste time, tell him. And I was like, at some point, I'm a polite person in general, but if you push the wrong buttons, I'm not polite anymore. So I said, yeah, I wouldn't be a very good teacher if I expected this moment to teach him what to say. So let him be and let me be and let us relax 5 minutes before the exam. So this thought stayed with me. And I've noticed over the years that the presentation for the speaking exams starts a long time before the actual exam class. And perhaps we can see traces of the student's learning biography from years ago in his current performance in the speaking test. So what are we going to see today? First of all, we are going to discuss the basic error we all make with oral exams. And it's not something that we do, but something that we think. Then we are going to see how Bloom's taxonomy is related with oral exams. And then we're going to see the affective filter factor, the role of emotions. We're going to discuss some individual differences between learners, which may account or may not account for weakness in speaking, weakness being lack of fluency, lack of accuracy, lack of both, lack of ideas, or general paralysis. The correlation between emotion and speaking, that's where the paralysis goes. And we will see a set of slides entitled, What Can Be Done? So without further ado, let us start. What is the basic error we all make about speaking? We consider it easy. We think that because there is a lot of digital communication, because people send messages, because there's YouTube and Netflix and all this, and students are exposed to the language, dealing with these topics will be easy. And there might be cases in which it is easy. For example, young learners' exams are relatively fair for the level of the students, the CFR level. But even that, if you add the stress and the unfamiliar environment and the unfamiliar examiner, we need to remember that speaking is neither easy nor straightforward. And there are many reasons for that. First of all, it combines doing two things at the same time. The brain is very busy processing information so that this information can be decoded, and then it needs to encode information. I usually tell my learners that speaking is time sensitive. Stop talking and go into a daze because you're trying to think of the perfect gambit to start your supported opinion in MSU. And the examiners are thinking, has the student suffered a stroke? Has he not heard us? They definitely feel that you have not understood the conventions of communication and the conventions of discussion, because in a discussion, when we talk to another person, we don't simply go and stop talking. We give them some sort of advance organizer. We give them a warning. We tell them, let me think. What about that? Yeah, true. We do something with language. But because they are so busy encoding the message and because they are so busy looking for that perfect word, we get into a standstill. And this standstill cannot be properly interpreted unless we know what is in their brains. And this creates a number of problems. For example, the students then feel that they're not certain if they heard the question correctly. They're not sure how to start. So if this is a practice task in class, you will hear Greek and, Miss, can you say that? Miss, I cannot do it. Miss, and I'm sure it all sounds very familiar. The other thing that makes speaking quite hard is that from B2 level onwards, when the for school exams stop, the topics are quite demanding. They require an adult way of thinking. I have prepared some examples on these based on an ECPE topic. They need to understand not only the task as the task per se, but questions. I'll give you an example. I didn't scan that one, but there is, I think it's book 2, CPE. There are pictures from an office, and it says, discuss, the first question for phase 1 is the role of silence. What kind of noises you can hear. So obviously somebody who's worked in an office can think of noises. I mean, just saying it, the schemata have been activated. I heard phones, I had the clicking of keyboards, I heard people murmuring on the phone, I hear footsteps, doors opening, drawers closing. But get teenagers to discuss that, and people think, what have they asked us? To talk about noises? And then the second question is to put these in order. I cannot remember the second topic. It was the first one that made such an impression on me, because for teenagers, it is frankly out of their league. It is out of their experience. So they need to understand the question. They need to understand the task. And they need to understand what the other candidate is saying. If the other candidate is not one of their league, one of their class, and happens to be more fluent, perhaps bilingual, with better accent, the other the other candidate might seem incomprehensible. In general, and here is where Bloom says, hi guys, critical thinking skills are major when it comes to speaking. And here's the topic I chose to present. This comes from Harrison, Cambridge University, Oxford University Press, CPE tests. In the photo, you see a man enjoying his free time. First, you have 1 minute to discuss whether what he does is beneficial or not to his health. So here is the opportunity the learners have to talk about the fact that he's sedentary, that he's eating unhealthy food, that he's watching television, lots to talk about. The first task in this case, despite the fact that they only have 1 minute or so, is doable. But the second, this is one of those, as you can see, despite the fact that this is a collaboration task where Cambridge provides us with far more pictures, 4, 5, 6. In this case, the picture is only 1. And the topic is that they were planning an article on how adults spend their free time. This was a picture taken for that purpose, but now it's been canceled. And now the students are asked to suggest. So this means an entirely new thinking cognitive process. They do not only need to discuss the photo and find faults with it. The man might not be the most indicative. I mean, he looks kind of fit. I mean, if he's fit and he spends his time sitting and eating, then okay, we can do it. It's not such a bad thing. He doesn't seem to be such a negative role model himself, physicality-wise. Secondly, it might not be well covering a general enough picture of free time or whatever. But the students have to find the peace of mind to organize their thoughts, discuss, apply the conventions of holding a discussion, debate, negotiate, agree, disagree, interrupt politely, and turn take, perhaps somebody they have never seen before, whom they might not see. And for those of us who have spent enough time in Thessaloniki, on Frankon Street or wherever else, waiting for our students to come out of the exam rooms, we see this weird phenomenon. We as teachers have not checked our notes. We as teachers we are not on the same page. For example, I have heard many times from candidates of mine, you see, these days we have 1 person taking the CPE. So we have to find a candidate who is not from our school, who's not from our class. In this case, I have heard quite a few disagreements. Miss, he kept interrupting me. Miss, he didn't know that he had to speak and ask me as well. So you see, we as teachers perhaps have not understood the task as well as we should. Perhaps we haven't given it the time because there's so much material to cover. And potentially we have said it, but it hasn't been heard. It hasn't become second nature. It hasn't become a habit. which is very important. So a task like this requires a lot more than just exam training, which is once again the reason why I mentioned adult thinking and the time to think. I find it odd that people are given time to think at IELTS, but they're not given time to think when they need to prepare their card for CPE. They're given something like 10 seconds. I don't consider this thinking time. This is just to read the card. There ought to be more time. Fortunately, for ECPE, the situation is different. They have plenty of time, perhaps the only case for that exam where there is plenty of time. So this is the task that I was talking to you about. It comes from prompts A and B from the ECPE examiner's booklet found on Orpheus. And the things that I point out, this is a topic in which the students are given a task to choose the best chef out of 4. To begin with, let me say a couple of things. I love the Cambridge speaking test. I think it's got the right duration, it's got the right variety of tasks to give students enough fresh starts. It's got the collaboration first so that the students can rely on each other. It's got the individual long run where the students do not necessarily have to use the ideas provided, but they are there to level the playing field. It's got discussion, it's got everything you need, and a very fair set of marking criteria. In the years that have intervened since this form of speaking has been established for ECPE, I've grown fonder and fonder of it. And I believe it's got a lot to give. I think it's got a positive washback effect. We can do a lot of things with that. And it gives students quite a lot of language, which makes even the most fluent of them unable to resist the temptation to take the idea, but not the lexical items. So this also needs training. It's also good that we have a given modus operandi. We know that the topic is always going to be a choice, a problem that needs to be solved. There is a need, and we need to choose 1 out of 4. The problem is that sometimes what seems so natural to us doesn't seem natural to the kids, and there is a reason for that. They're kids. They haven't worked. They do not know how hiring and firing works. They do not know what it means to be an employee. They might not understand things which have nothing to do with English, but with basic schematic knowledge. So they need to understand, first of all, what it means to hire professionals. You need to see, you need to find the best. You need to pick out any potential weaknesses and actually delve into them so that you don't hire an unsuitable candidate. They need to be able to understand the points. There are frequent times when the students read the point, they say it verbatim. I stop them if it's an exercise and I say, try that, or try a derivative, or link it somehow differently, or join the dots, draw a conclusion. And they look at me and they say, Miss, I don't really understand why that is a point. What do they mean? The greatest of such misunderstandings was a topic from the ECPE book 1 by HAU. I think it's the first prompt. I'm not entirely sure. The one about choosing a caterer, where one of the caterers charges $1 if the menu is going to be served. And as we were doing the task, supposedly they're planning an event for 300 people. My student said, so he just charges $1 extra, so it's not a big thing. And when we did the feedback, I said, you do realize it's $1 per 300 people, so it's $300 extra. And he said, really? I said, yep, it is important. $300 means something. Ooh, yes. So this is adult thinking, understanding the points, understanding how they are linked so that they can put them in a better order. So, for example, steakhouse cook for 13 years and focuses on traditional American cuisine, tastes, dishes, that's very well linked together. That's a good start. Skilled baker needs to follow so that you can put this under his belt as well. So then other things can follow. And this also shows how the students' critical thinking worked while they were preparing their summary. They need to realize why an advantage is an advantage and why the downside is a downside. And they need to make this obvious. They need to join the dots. He has won 2 cooking competitions. Okay, this is easy for an average C2 learner to paraphrase. He came first in cooking competitions, or when he took part in a competition, he came first. He came first twice. He won an award. He won the prize twice in cooking competitions. But the thing is, what does that mean? That means that he's a celebrity, a star. He's well known in his field. Then they need to understand why the downside is a downside. For example, why is the fact that he changes jobs frequently such an important thing? And how can they explain this? These are important issues, once again, that may have a little bit to do with English, to the extent that the students need to understand the language, but mainly they have to do with the students' schematic language. So, what can good old Bloom do for us? Well, Bloom can help us analyze what is needed in the exams by the candidates. What do the candidates need to bring in? And they need to bring the entire taxonomy. What I need to remind us once more is that this is not a knowledge test. Therefore, remembering is not as important as when taking a history or a biology or even a physics exam, but they need to be creative. They need to be able to analyze and evaluate. In fact, this is exactly why they cannot pick out reasons why the positive, the advantages and advantages, so on. So let's see this in greater detail. First of all, the candidates have to recall, they have to be calm enough, and I'm trying to insert the affective filter factors. They need to remember facts, and facts might be simple things like how to structure the verb plan, or how to, use specific phrases. They have to recall vocabulary. They need to be able to understand the nature of the task. That's very important. That's why we cannot do the speaking in a hurry. That's why it has to be part of the routine of the lesson. They have to understand the specific questions as well as the other candidates' output. Then they have to apply this knowledge. In various cases, students make silly grammatical mistakes, not because they do not recall the grammar rule or the grammar phenomenon, but because they are too preoccupied with what is going on, and they just want to say it and be done with. They're not they're not calm enough to organize their thoughts. The next set is that they need to analyze what they have been given and process it so that they can assess what they have been given, see what is a positive point, what is a negative point, which points might be perceived either positive or negative, and they can create their own output. Creating one's own output requires opinions, and it's very hard these days to find people, young people, who have an opinion, they understand their own opinion, it's not fuzzy in their heads, and they can justify it. They can stand behind it and explain why they think this. So creating one's own output isn't, once again, as straightforward. And at this point, you might ask me, why on earth did you decide to call this session Emphasis on Affective Factors? Why? It's the brain that takes the exam. It's a cognitive thing. It's being well prepared so that the vocabulary comes and the grammar is accurate and all of that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because that makes us human, we are dominated, our brain is dominated by emotions. And we have seen this, we have experienced this plenty of times. In fact, we as professionals experience this very situation. I know many teachers who would make excellent conference presenters, and yet they never want to stand in front of their peers and present because they feel exposed, ashamed, embarrassed, uncomfortable, awkward, all of the above, and in any random order. So this is it's not easy to harness the complexity of the speaking exam. And the reason why we are studying the affective factors is, first of all, personality. I think I've said this story once before. I was once training teachers in a foreign language school in Athens, but it was a huge crowd. The school was a chain, and they didn't understand that so many teachers would be coming. So we were in an uncomfortable setting, and we started well. People were really eager, and they really liked the session that I was doing. But as I looked at them, I felt that I couldn't just tell them work in pairs or small groups because I had prepared a pair work activity to start with. I felt I needed to give those who didn't want to work with anyone the opportunity to think silently. And this is the right, I mean, in the 1980s, if somebody said, oh, I don't want to take part in a group work activity, it was like, say what? Why? Nowadays, with individual differences and acceptance and inclusivity, I think we owe it to our learners to give them the opportunity to work on their own. That's why we have so many exams. And to be honest, this is why I respect the MSU exam so much, because it is the only exam that actually gives learners the opportunity at C2 level to speak on their own, especially if they're adults. Imagine having an adult who is trying so hard with his own fluency and accuracy, having to paraphrase, which becomes even more difficult when one is an adult, and having to compete probably with a teenager. Nightmare. That's all I can think of. Now, apart from the personality factors, we have to think of the learners learning biography. Have they been taught by in the same school? Has the teaching method been the same? Have they been taught by teachers who are communicative mainly, or mainly focusing on covering material, doing a lot of grammar, bookish things? Have they assimilated what they have been taught? Say what we may, unless assimilation takes place, nothing has been learned. There's always an element of good luck or bad luck, which we cannot pin at all. A test might be great, the topics might be fantastic, the examiners might be super, and there might be other times when the topic is a bit out of the ordinary, or not what the students liked, or not close to their interests, or there might be a weird examiner. Some years ago, an examiner yelled at my candidate, who was a tall boy, very confident, but awkward. I mean, obviously, he was 190, and as he was getting ready to deliver his summary, he looked at all people. He looked at his classmate and the two examiners, and as he made eye contact with his classmate, the examiner interrupted him and said, "Don't look at the other student's paper." And it's a good thing that that was a student who was comfortable and confident and had a way of dealing with that. If there had been another student whose confidence was not so strong, there would have been issues. So another thing that we need to be mindful of is that examiners are also people. And we need to take into consideration their own experience, their own knowledge of the test, and also their own understanding of their role, which is very important. Finally, we cannot really talk about clear thinking when we are overwhelmed by emotions such as fear, stress, or simply being too overwhelmed by the whole storm of emotions to deal with anything practical. So, all of these make the speaking exam an activity fraught with emotional barriers. I'm not bringing or gloom and doom like a month before the exams. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Far from it. Fortunately, 99.9% of our learners are confident speakers. They tend to speak fluently, but they make mistakes, or they tend to be more careful. They avoid mistakes. They miss out on accuracy. But most of them will get a bare pass or a good passing grade when they take the exam. There are those, though, who are facing issues. And why might they be facing issues? Well, the first thing might be hurried exam preparation. If parents or if the school, for some reason, wants a student to take the exam through an intensive group, and they have just started, and there is no time. Speaking and writing are time consuming. They eat up time. They might have had limited production, which means that they have not had enough feedback given to them. In general, the course may not have focused on speaking. And what I mean by that is not simply focus on the task. And I will come back to this point. There might be personality issues. Some people are more extrovert, more sociable. They love the sound of their own voice. They feel great when they stand in front of an audience and give presentations. Other people hate it. They would rather write an essay rather than speak in front of people. Some of these children have not been taught to have an opinion. They've been told to shut up more than they would like to think. They have been violently interrupted by adults. Shut up, I want to listen to the news. They have been interrupted by teachers who focused more on present continuous rather than on the content of their output. Therefore, these children developed a kind of fear towards expressing themselves, and they have not received enough feedback. Finally, they might be simply weak. If learners do not have a range of structures and lexical items, they will end up repeating the same thing again and again and again in different ways, but it's just that one idea and this. Finally, we have the role of the parents. Parents play a very important part. Some years ago, quite a lot of years ago, I was giving report cards in our school, and a mother came with whom I had been on the phone. We had spoken on the phone, we hadn't met. And her son was taking the B2 exam. And I explained to her that he exhibits hesitation, too many stops and starts. I sometimes told him, go with your first idea, just finish it. Don't stop and change it. And you do that all the time. It's like you're never sure. And I said, he's trying, he is conscientious, but it seems like he doesn't have the confidence to do it. And his mother said, good beginning. Thank you for letting me know. Worry not. Up until that time, I was like, I will help him. I will support him. Something like, I'll show him. He will start speaking. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, that's not the tone to go about it. This is exactly what got the boy not to be able to speak. So we need to see what kind of pressure the children are under at home and what the situation is at home. There are several times when parents are really deluded about their offspring's abilities. I'm sure you have seen it. I have seen it. We've all seen it. They think they are raising the next widow's son when their daughter can barely string 3 words in one sentence, in one phrase, without making 5 errors. They might be very stressed themselves, exhibiting a kind of exaggerated behavior. I gave you an example before. The mother who was always touching her son, kissing him, fixing his hair, straightening his jacket. All of this might be because the parents feel the stress of their children, they feel the anxiety, and they need to show that they are doing something to help. Truth of the matter is that while we're waiting outside the examination center, there's nothing we can do. We can tell stories about our exams. We can speak to the learners in English to bombard them with as much language as we can. We can get them to speak as well so that they can start the warm-up from before they get into the exam room. But other than that, the thing is out of our hands now. So parents can be supportive. By being supportive, they can distress their kids. And nothing counts. I mean, we experience it. We are adults. And yet when a friend or a family member says, I'm here for you, it's even if they do nothing, even if it's just a word, I'm here for you. And everything changes. We feel instantly better. Parents also need to be informed by the way their children will be assessed, how many candidates, how long. This is very important because when they do not have this information, they go a bit funny and they start asking weird questions. It's best if we give them these answers from before. I am a firm believer. For those of you who regularly come to my sessions, you know that I am a firm believer in exam presentations and level presentations so that parents can have all this information and so that they know that speaking is not that little thing at the end of the exams that doesn't matter as much as grammar or writing. It matters equally as much. So let's start with what can be done. Well, first of all, tear that exam book. Forget the exam. That's my first thing to do. So by forgetting the exam, I mean make speaking an active component of every lesson. We don't have to do the exam task to teach students to identify advantages, identify disadvantages, and establish why the advantage is a good thing and the disadvantage a bad thing. By making the speaking an active component of the lesson, we train learners to think on their feet and we form habits. Also, we can help them develop greater confidence through that. So speaking can be used in the lead-in, before reading, before writing, before we start on our grammar presentation, as an active component that leads to the presentation of the grammatical phenomenon. It can be used before and after listening tasks, reading tasks. It can be used in writing. It can be used in listening. Any writing topic can be developed as a speaking task before or after the listening tasks. The students can be asked to give their opinion, especially if we do a learning from the experts or if we do a note-taking task. Or if we listen to two people who disagree on something, we can get the students to tell us who they agree with. We don't even have to do the actual test. We can, for once, forget about the task of the test and just ask them to listen and group one, note down the main ideas of the woman. Group B, listen and note down the main ideas of the man, and then compare and contrast what's your opinion on this topic. So listening becomes more than listening and more than 23A, 22B, and all of that. Creating an active speaking culture means that we encourage pair work and group work. And this means that the students are ready. They know what it means to be silent when other people are speaking. They get trained in note-taking, which is a needed trait for the ECPE exam. And by using spaced retrieval, i.e. by discussing the topic, the text, audio, or written of the previous lesson, we get the students to do a variety of tasks, for critical thinking tasks. For example, here are a few keywords. Can you retell me the story, the task, the article we read yesterday? What is the main problem? What are the solutions? What are the advantages of each solution? What are the disadvantages? What are the negative points that remain? And in this way, we can encourage pair work. They can develop the answers together, pull their resources, and then they can present one by one, or even they can do the presentation in groups. One of my favorite activities is when I dare students, I give them, I start with 10 minutes. Sometimes if the class is not so strong, I might start with 7 minutes. And I tell them in the next 7 minutes, we do not speak any Greek, which means you cannot ask me, Miss, how should I say, how can I say? You can ask me, but you need to ask me in English. They do not ask. They are very busy trying to stay on track. And this time limit grows a quarter of an hour, half an hour. And then by the end of the lesson, they forget it. They just keep speaking English. Getting them used to pair work and group work is extremely important because that's how they will be examined. And they need to understand that when the other person is speaking, this is no time for snoozing. This is time for paying attention. We need to explain to them, and they need to understand that discussions are dominated by conventions, how we look at the other person and we don't look at out of the window, or we don't look at the ceiling, although it's instinctive to look high up when we're trying to think. They need to get used to expressing their opinion in a given span of time, 1 minute, 2 minutes, which means they need to understand how long a minute is. To do this, we need to give them presentation tasks, get them trained, get them to watch TED Talks, positive examples of presenters, and then get them to do their own presentation, which is a free interpretation of the individual long run. The individual long run is the student's monologue. They get grades, they get points for their discourse from this. It's very important for students to be able to speak unaided, to sustain their speaking, to start to indicate the advantages, the disadvantages, the contrasts, the surprising elements, and finally to draw conclusions and lead to the Q&A that comes after that. The presentation can help the teacher examine the extent to which learners can speak without aid. Of course, a presentation is prepared, students may have notes, but still, it is a pretty good attempt. They are also public, and they get students into the habit of speaking in front of an audience. The learners get to present a threaded discourse. They cannot speak with staccata and single words. They have to draw conclusions, and we can provide feedback. Now, the opposite of what I said before, on the one hand, we have to tear up the exam, but on the other hand, we have to teach the exam format. Once I was doing an exam training class, and we had done the presentation of the speaking. And I was, I think that was prior to Kahoot, because now I have a Kahoot for this, but I was asking the students, how long do you have for this? What do you do in that? In which stage do they give you photos? Blah, blah, blah. And the student said, Miss, why do I need to remember all this? Won't they tell me? And that boy happened to be a basketball player. And I said, do you know the rules of basketball? Yeah. Do you know what will happen to you if you don't follow the rules? Yep. Do you know who enforces the rules? Yep. That's the same with exams. It's like playing a game, like taking part in a very important athletic competition. The way you know the rules of the game, of your event, the same way you need to know the rules of the exam. So it's important to start early. There are many things that we need to do, from how we present ourselves, even the data that the students have to give about themselves, to how we handle disagreement. For example, some students are always worried. So, Miss, in the collaboration task for CPE, if we don't agree on the same pictures, is it a problem? No, it's not a problem. Just state your disagreement, explain why you disagree. We also need to understand the exam. So we need to study the exam board website to see what they have to suggest. Sometimes they give videos, they give worksheets. We can create a worksheet based on the teacher's handbook, but the videos with the real candidates are priceless, especially if we do them once before and once afterwards, and we get the students to use the criteria to grade them. If I am not mistaken, the videos that are on the Orpheus website, if you follow the links through, you also get from the first comment, there are some PDFs that give you the candidate's performance and comments from the examiners. So it's a great task to get the students to examine what these candidates have done and grade them as per their assessment criteria given. It is essential that the students know everything about the exam before the exam, and that they know the criteria so that they can understand where their strengths lie, where their weaknesses can be located. In order to do that, it's very important to, once again, start early so that we can teach this step by step. The next thing is to gamify it. As I told you, I have a Kahoot. So once we do the exam preparation, the next lesson we play the Kahoot to see just how much they remember. Still they ask. And of course, we organize mock tests. In this case, I'm not going to talk about mini mocks and maxi mocks, because for the speaking test, for the speaking exam, it doesn't make sense to do a mini mock. It's not like not giving students the entire reading paper or the entire ECPE, but giving them part of it. In this case, it will be done, though 30 minutes, 35 minutes is not a laughing matter, especially if the candidates are quite a few. Why are they so special? Because they are replicas of the actual tests. So the students can see the topics, the parts, the duration. They can see the marking criteria, and they can create their own procedures so that they can be safe. And this situation can highlight the practical problems. Which are the practical problems? First of all, we see that students do not immediately understand that now they are candidates, which means now they cannot stop speaking English, turn to me and ask me in perfect Greek, Miss, how do I say this in English? They have to find a way to stay afloat and paraphrase, describe the situation, because they cannot remember the word or because they don't know it. They need to understand and respect the conventions of holding a discussion, which means that this creates issues for us to give them feedback about their eye contact if they do not look at the examiner or their classmate, the other candidate. How long is a minute? Have they realized it? Do they speak for too little? Do they it's not a problem if they exceed. If they exceed, they'll give them 10 seconds to wrap up, and then they'll say thank you, and that's it. There is no problem. But some students stop and they just look, and this is so awkward because the examiners won't go to the next task. They will wait until the full minutes given to the student are done, and then they will move on to avoid being accused of interrupting the students and not letting them finish. Sometimes we have students who are easy to lose their focus. While the other child is presenting, while the other candidate is presenting, they're like somewhere, they would be playing with their mobile phone if they had it. But that's why they start losing focus, which means they do not remember what the other person said. And the question, do you agree? Do you have anything to add? How does your experience differ? Cannot be answered because they have no idea. The teachers, us, can actually see what needs to be discussed in class. For example, we need to understand why learners translate certain phrases. For example, I see many students using the phrase "and that," because in Greek it does make sense, but in English it's empty talk. We also have students who are unable to focus, mainly because they are emotionally overloaded. They're overwhelmed. We have students who veer off topic. I had students who were so fluent. They just couldn't harness the wealth of what they had to share. They went from one thing to another and they didn't actually hit the bullseye of the question. And this requires training. Just because the student has used good vocabulary, this is not a successful reply unless they manage to hit the bullseye and answer the question. I've had students who misunderstood the topic, or crowning moment of my career, I had a student who didn't want to speak. Now, in the years that intervened, because that was just before the coronavirus, it was just before COVID. I think it was the last exam period before COVID. Nowadays, I think I would have dealt with it differently. Of course, my fear was what will happen if, because they took the ECP exam. So what will happen if the other student, if he doesn't speak in the actual exams? He was a very clever boy. He is actually a very clever boy, a university student now. So I should simply have let him off the hook. You don't want to do the mock? Don't do the mock. But my fear was what will happen if he doesn't speak in the actual exam and the other kid is left without a partner who can actually function. You might wonder why he took an exam in which he had to be in pairs with another person. I believe that he did what the mainstream thing that everybody does. We take the ECPE exam and that's it. I don't think it ever crossed his mind that he wouldn't speak. If you want to know what happened, he passed and he actually had an okay speaking session. I cannot remember his grade, of course, but we didn't have a nasty surprise, which taught me that although they might be a bit resistant when it's me, when push comes to shove and they're in front of an examiner, they will speak. So is that because I'm not convincing as an assessor? Hardly. I am convincing as an assessor, but I also need to see my role as an assessor. I also need to do my studying. I need to be two things at once. I need to be their examiner, and at the same time, I need to have assessment for learning in my mind so that I can take all these juicy takeaways, filter them, and put them back into my teaching so that I can not just give them a grade, but also collect points that require feedback. So that I can help them improve their performance. This means that we need to become experts. We need to see how the exam is carried out, how the students are ushered, what they do at different stages, what kind of script the examiners use, and provide them extensive exposure to this. It is also very important to understand the rationale of the framework of assessment and apply it faithfully. It also makes sense if there are 2 or 3 groups of Prof 2 to examine each other's learners, not just one's own learners. This makes it fairer. The greatest reality out of mock tests is that the oral test stops being a theory and becomes a reality. Therefore, apart from the fact that the students get to see the format, they develop routines, they develop habits, and this is a life jacket, a rope that holds them when they are in a panicky situation. They feel prepared, they know what they are getting ready for, they know what to expect, and the mock gives us the opportunity to try out the strategies, see if they work, and the students can ask questions. As you know, I love a game that I play with my students. It's called All Horrors, inspired from Halloween. And we start inviting all horrors. So, what are the worst scenarios that can happen? What can go frightfully wrong during an oral exam? How are we going to solve it? The good thing is that we do solve it, so they feel strong. These are the stages of the mock exam. So prior to that, we need to build experience through exposure, familiarize them with the marking criteria, and show them videos so that they can understand the exam, and we give them time to rehearse. While we can have a choice of topics. Usually, I prefer topics that are as close as unfiltered by publishers as can be. So either HAU or CPE topics or MSU topics. I try to do my best to apply the marking scale faithfully. If in doubt, I prefer to be strict rather than lenient, as long as I don't feel that lenience will boost the student's confidence. Therefore, it's an added bonus in that case. And I try to keep to time. I wrote that because when I started doing oral mocks, I did not keep to the time. It was overlong. So no, keep to the time. It's important. After this, we can provide feedback. We can give students comments. We can give them their grades. Actually, in these last few years, I don't type these. I just write them as they speak. I point out a couple of mistakes, and I also give them points to act on until the next mock. It is important to give them some sort of grade so that they know where they are doing well and where they should improve. It is also important to set priorities. So for the next test, make sure that you avoid those long, so one goal at a time so that we can fix the most difficult tasks. But the question is, what can a teacher do if there are multiple exams in one class? Well, obviously, what can be done is at school level, one teacher can do the MSU speaking, the other the CPE, and the other the ECPE. So even if we have 3 groups, each of the teachers can undertake one exam and see the students separately. The problem here might be practical. The students might not be able to come to a lesson that is not on the days when they do have a lesson. So an easier way would be to present the exams to the learners and give them the video to watch at home so that we don't overload the lesson with material the others might find boring. And we get them to compare and contrast their exams to see what is similar, what is different, to see the exam criteria. This helps them understand that no exam is easy, no exam is evkolaki, and they all need time to think and time to prepare. Then we get the students to work in subgroups as they will take the exam, and we give them a relevant topic, which we do not work as a mock test. We work with it step by step. For example, when students are given their first summarizing task, I get them to work in pairs or in groups so that they can truly pull their resources. When CPE candidates get ready to discuss their card, to prepare for their card task, I make it a class activity. I get them to discuss it in groups. I collect ideas and get them to see how the ideas connect to the bullet points. So as I mentioned, the speaking tests have great washback effect. What else can we do? We can organize the day of the oral exams, first of all, by organizing our own presence. It's the moral duty that surpasses all others. It is an ultimate obligation. It's not even an obligation, it's a joy to be there. And there is a practical reason for that. We know people, we know the rules, we know where we should go. If anything happens and the kids are with their parents and the parents start panicking, horrible things might happen. So the teacher needs to be there, especially when this is a paired exam and one of the candidates doesn't have a pair. I know that in some cases, teachers take the whole group, like my group and the other colleagues group. But, there is no point in escorting students we do not know. If we have taught these students, or if we have shared the mock exams, or if we have corrected each other's tests and we have done each other's mocks, then it does make sense, because in effect, we have been teachers in that class. We have to have their own paperwork with us. I have a folder, and in it I have their identity cards photocopied, and also their exam board identities. You never know what might happen. You never know who might wake up without an ID. I know that it's only a photocopy, but, until parents come back to fetch their kids, to get their kids back, they can bring the ID, and that will be the end of it. Also, we need to be there earlier to make sure that they do not go to another place. I'm running out of time, so I cannot tell you my joke, but many, many years ago, I was trying to give directions to a mother to find us in the Hyatt ballrooms. I did write on the paper that was given to the kids, do not go to the reception. The ballrooms, the reception area is from the parking area straight on your ahead of you. But the mother had gone to the reception. So to cut a long story short, after I described my clothing, said that I have turned the corner, gave a description of where I was standing, I said, I cannot see you. Which side of the hotel you are? And she said, what hotel? And I said, the hotel where we're taking the exams, Hyatt. And she said, I'm at the casino. Of course, there was silence because her kid couldn't get into the casino. So I'm not sure what exactly she was thinking about where her kid would take the exam. But, suffice it to say they were there and they took the exam. So that was a good thing. So it's very important to keep parents at bay, especially if the parents are like this. If the mother is behaving in a more childish way than her kid, if the kid is in a way like, don't fuss, let me be, woman, and the woman keeps fussing over her kid, we need to intervene. Like, let us talk. I will take them aside. You have your coffee, go your way. It's not a time for parents. We need to inform them. We need to tell them where, when, how long, give them specific details. They do not need to be there. In my experience, there have been very few cases in which I said, thank God this mother was here. I said it for one mother who was a pediatrician. It was a real godsend to have her on exam days. I never had to worry about anything. But if they appear to be passing their stress on the kid, if the mother is there and she's making jokes or talking about summer holidays or saying nice things about me and the school and everything, then it's fine. They're not in the way. But if they are adding to the stress of the students, we need to distract them politely, use our sense of humor, and let the poor kids be. So some horrible scenarios. What if the candidate is too late for oral exams? It doesn't really matter. They might not take the exam with the pair that has been assigned to them, but it's okay. We can just tell the supervisor they had their car was, somebody parked in front of them. They couldn't get out. The child felt a bit sick, so they stayed home to see if she needed to go to the bathroom. She's fine now. They are on the way. What if the child is sick only on the day of the oral exam? This requires getting in touch with the exam board, but I have a strong feeling that you can take a rain check. So armed with your paper, the formal document from the public health unit, health center, hospital, the parents can proceed to the exam. We can all proceed to the exams on a following day, probably near the end of the exams. What if the child has problems with his or her documents? Once a student of mine lost her identity card between the written part and the oral exams. Nothing. These days, parents have copies on Gov Wallet, whatever that is called. They also have the health document, the health portfolio for their kids. Any such document can be a stopgap solution until the permanent passport identity can be provided, which can be done within the same day. The difficult thing is what happens if the kid decides that they do not want to go in. In fact, I saw a child last year. She was coming from Dodekanissu, and her teacher waved at her, and she said, "Come, come! They've called you." The teacher was absolutely sweet. She didn't scare off the kid, but it was like the kid was like, "No, no, I cannot go." She was petrified, and the teacher handled it beautifully. She took the kid aside. They talked. She calmed her down, and she went in. It's very important to get students in on a positive feeling. Usually I tell our students, δεν ήρθαμε να το δώσουμε, ήρθαμε να το πάρουμε. And this is our little joke, our shared joke. So we didn't come to to take exams. We have come to take the certificate. So in a nutshell, we need to make speaking an everyday part of our lesson. We need to start exam practice early to introduce the format. We need to work on a layered way, organize mock orals, and do not miss out any of the stages. Parents need to be involved, informed, told where and when, so that they can be controlled better. The less they know, the more they're going to ask. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please don't go because I haven't kept your names and it's me who prepares the certificates. Best of luck to all our candidates and happy Easter break. Our next event will be on the 7th of June. That's a Sunday with Yona Mochlin. And as I mentioned before, I will be sending you information about the TESOL Macedonia-thrace teacher training course. So let me just quickly take a screenshot so that I don't delay you. And thank you so much for being here. I'm not sure if you have any questions and you would like us to discuss them.
Maria, can I speak?
Yes, of course, Effie.
Yeah, hello again. Not a question, but I would like to thank you once again for this excellent webinar and offering us a lot of pieces of advice, which are useful, I think, not only for these specific exams, but for speaking in general in class, for mixed ability classes, for everything. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for being here every single time because it makes all the
too.
difference. And thank you for your kind words.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
We'll see you again. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Maria, I don't have a question. I just want to say something about the oral exam because it has happened to me before with a student of mine. You can reschedule an oral exam. You cannot reschedule a written exam.
No, the written is gone.
For sure.
Yeah.
So for the oral exam, if there is a serious case, health issue, they can do it.
Once I remember, like it was yesterday, they sent the invitations for the exams quite late. And it was like Wednesday, I opened my student's identity and he was taking the exam on Sunday. And it was his sister's christening. So I called HAU straight away and they said, we cannot do that. And I said, guys, you sent it on Wednesday and it's a Sunday and they are having a christening. It's his sister. He can't be absent. And somebody said, can you prove it? And they said, yeah, I can send you the invite. Of course I can prove it. It's a family affair. But of course it wasn't needed. We rescheduled it. Yes, you're right. It can be, especially, but they do need certificates from public health organizations, not private doctors.
Yes, I know. That's the case. Anyways, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. It was lovely to see you. See you again in June. Enjoy and happy Easter to all with yours. Bye-bye.